Oh, fun fact, all the characters in Brawl's intro shot are flat images, not 3D models. Welcome to the video. Super Smash Bros. Brawl is maybe the most divisive Smash game in the series, split between people who play Smash Bros. Competitively and people who like themselves, but to me, the one thing it indisputably is the most interesting entry into the franchise. The late 2000s for Nintendo was their peak bug-and-brain era for really indulging in the perceived power of the new generation of consoles. While the Wii was considerably weaker than its counterparts, it still was a major jump from the GameCube, its last primary home console, and they got a really big head about it. Across the entire industry, there was more and more tools and horsepower to start to resemble something sort of resembling reality as the late 2000s went on, and so the entire frontier of cinematics over gameplay began to take hold. Games shifted primarily from Jackson Pollock color splashes to built-in colorblind mode in a single generation. Games were gritty and real and dusty now, like a lot of dust, and while some might have expected Nintendo to stay true, no, they let Sega give Shadow the Hedgehog pistols. Their own games, too, were painted under an entirely different light. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was a launch title for the Wii and the final first-party game released to the GameCube, a metaphorical door opening and door closing in service of the new generation of gaming, and the message was clear, high definition, and painted in orange, brown, and gray, and given a bloom filter because why not? And in line with this new direction and hope for gaming as a cinematic spectacle, nearly every series Nintendo had running got their own spectacular, over-detailed iteration. Mario Strikers Charged popped into existence asking the question of what if Mario characters knew what blood was and wanted to try some. Call of Duty was ported to the Wii. Rayman Raving Rabbids was just a lot, honestly. Like, this is what the movie Astro Boy looked like. This is the game adaptation. Look at this alt cover. Astro Boy looks like a Funko Pop normally. You can't do this. The Super Smash Bros. Series was not the first to take a ton of characters from other games and mash them together, but it has continued to arguably be the most ambitious. Nintendo was famously and borderline anxiously protective of its IPs, so the idea of plucking each of these characters out from their own universe and placing them in one spot is a tough job for anyone to mend artistically. And so, what happened for practically every Smash game was to form a compromise of sorts. We'll use as much of each IP as we can for settings, trophies, and items, and for the gray areas, we'll figure it out. As a result, each and every Smash game served to reflect the era in which it was born. In most cases, this meant a playful, colorful, somewhat generic binding look with graphical quality being a bit less than but close to the peak fidelity of the time. However, for the new Smash game coming out on the Wii, that mirror reflected something notably different. Faced with the option to show anything as a first look towards the new Smash, they decided to show a comparison. This is what gaming was, and this is what gaming is now. Out of all the Smash games to this day, Brawl is arguably the most ambitious, even if Smash 4 and Ultimate are technically larger. Not unlike Dark Souls 2, Brawl is a minefield of assembled ideas without the polishing of the conceptual hallways to bring you smoothly to each one. The Smash series itself has always been a bit scattered from its conception due to the simple fact that for a very long time there simply was nothing like it. Masahiro Sakurai, before the game ever included Nintendo characters, intentionally set out to make a fighting game unlike any other, and in the process formed and dominated the platform fighter genre, one where the more you're hit, the further you go, and you die by being hit outside of the bounds of the screen. So, while the core of the Smash games has and always will be its regular mode, short, tight battles on small stages, the game series is, in a word, decentralized. It offers a set of rules that no other game did, so starting mostly with Melee, it was able to explore that concept completely uncontested. Variations on the base game were added like All-Star mode, turning matches into an endurance test, needing to beat every character in the game with damage that persists between fights. Classic mode, the only alternate mode that was in the original Smash game, puts every character on their own tailored set of battles, eventually ending with a fight against Master Hand in this space dimension. The engine itself was also borrowed for things that drift further and further from the traditional Smash battle. Target Test avoids any one-on-one conflict at all, instead focusing on movement and stages designed specifically for every character's moveset, serving as a test and a practice of a sort for each one. Home Run Contest, maybe the most iconic next to Classic, forces you to stack as much damage as you can in the space of 10 seconds on a sandbag before launching it as far as you're able to optimize. And, very importantly, there was and is a real effort in every Smash game to make all of these a part of the whole experience. You're able to unlock characters through alternate game modes, there's built-in achievements and unlockables, there's spirits and stickers, but it never really works. Who gives a shit about the money system in these games exactly? It feels like Nintendo wants Smash Bros. To both never be just one thing, but all one thing, an exercise of ambition but fractured in its direction, something cohesive but with hard lines placed between everything. Small, simple minigames, but also something more. Anyways, Subspace Emissary is the story mode of Super Smash Bros. Brawl. It is very weird. For the uninitiated, this is by all technicalities just another mode to the game. It's in the solo tab of the main menu right next to the other minigames and is not made a significant amount larger than classic mode despite being a significant amount larger than classic mode. The moment it begins, we're open to an aerial shot of an arena floating in the sky above a vast, nondescript landscape. We're introduced to Zelda and Peach spectating the canonized sport of Super Smash Bros., a gladiator-style match showcased to a crowd of screaming fans. They're summoned to life from the state of being trophies, what apparently happens to these characters when they're quote-unquote defeated, and you're given a choice between fighting as Kirby or Mario. You choose one, defeat the other, and another cutscene plays. If this were to be how the story mode operated the entire time, cutscenes then battles then cutscenes, I would not be making this video. Suddenly, as Mario and Kirby are preparing to fight again, Meta Knight's ship cuts through the sky and airdrops shadowy spores onto the arena, forming into these puppeteered masses called Primids. Zelda and Peach hop down from the stands, and you again have a choice of who to play with. You fight through a horde of weak, non-playable enemies until another cutscene plays, a mysterious entity preparing a bomb, and in the distraction, Mario is launched out of the stadium and Peach and Zelda are locked in a cage by a giant piranha plant. Kirby is now the only one left, and they need to save the day. You fight the plant, whosever cage you break first is the one that survives, the other person gets shot by a trophy and gunned by Wario, all weird Nintendo shit, right? But then something very interesting happens. You and whoever you saved escape in the nick of time, but as you do, the entire arena is consumed by a shadowy void. Stage clear! This is the most normal this story mode will ever get, and by all means it could have simply been a canonized tournament fighter with some sprinkling of a story between the battles, but Nintendo was feeling ambitious. Brawl was a reflection of the time, and the 2000s was one where every company was aiming to flex games as an art form and as a powerhouse, and so Sakurai was seeking, above all else, to have it be something more. Subspace Emissary is an apocalypse story. These bombs, subspace bombs, are being used to consume this world that all the Smash characters live inside of. The traditional villains, Bowser, Ganondorf, Wario, and King Dedede, are working together for reasons unexplained to destroy as much of the world as they can, and every level features some combination of the good guys working together to try and stop more of the world from being consumed, and most of the time failing. These cutscenes, this pseudo-movie, I'll be honest, is the only reason people remember this story mode, because the gameplay... Let's talk about the gameplay. Subspace Emissary is a platforming side-scroller with characters with movesets not tailored for side-scrolling platformers going around aesthetically contrasting environments fighting incoherently related enemies in a nonsensical series of coincidences. Cohesion is not the word to describe Subspace Emissary's gameplay, it is in fact cohesive in the consistency of its utterly disconnected nature. The second level of the game has you play as Pit because Pit so happened to be watching the match when shit hit the fan, and Palutena sends him down to save Mario and chase the ship. While the first level was not a dishonest showing of what the rest of the game will play like, it was a limited one, as we come to find the actual gameplay loop that will consume most of the campaign's substance. Actual, fully built side-scroller levels going through a number of worlds from different game canons. These worlds are connected in-universe either because A, they have to be, or B, they have to A, sorry. This necessity and loose requirement for things that technically make sense turns the sort of game board present between levels into one of those geography landform posters. You need the heavens for Pit, and the desert for Fire Emblem, and the jungle for Donkey and Diddy Kong, and on and on. There is a further justification for why this is, but in terms of gameplay and for the story most people take in, it's utterly jarring. As for the side-scroller levels themselves, they, for a lack of a better way to put it, kinda suck. Much like the extra minigames and modes in prior, current, and future Smash games, it's a departure from the regular structure of Smash, but most of them held on to the core game mechanics with slight alterations. Revisiting the game a few weeks ago, I was constantly and presently reminded of how not of a side-scroller Smash Bros. Is. In regular side-scrolling platformers, movement and speed and enemy design are normally created in a synthesis of each other to make it a smooth experience, or rather one where the challenge feels natural and eminent from the properties of a side-scrolling platformer. In Smash, character speed is measured not in relation to levels, but in relation to other characters. Balance as a whole is done in comparison to how they match to other people or CPUs that you're fighting either one-on-one or in small groups. Ike's speed is not paced to a level, he is paced in relation to the scale of Ganondorf to Sonic. In Target Test, a game mode specifically designed around platforming, the levels were tailored entirely around the movement of each individual Smash character. They didn't quite resemble regular platforming because Smash is not that, and the mode felt natural because it was accounted for. In contrast, Subspace Emissary forces them into conventions of an entirely different genre and doesn't really stick the landing. When your damage is translated to how far you can be launched, enemies by design either need to be weak or need to be horribly irritating. The levels in Subspace Emissary don't really have a threat. You can lose all of your lives, recycling through all the fighters available in the extra stocks, but you aren't even reset to the start of the level if you lose all of them. The only thing that you lose is the time to watch the losing cutscene, and similarly, the way that enemies punish you is primarily through delaying. Not only are they the things that are threatening to kill you, the thing they do most of the time is just put your character in hit stun. By design, these characters are not meant to pose a threat, not really, they're just meant to get in your way. And honestly, the biggest issue is that they're too competent at it. Speaking of hit stun, the vast majority of enemies in Subspace receive basically 0. Again, harkening back to characters being bounced for each other, all movesets in Brawl are designed around the simple concept that if you land a hit, your enemy will be delayed unless they properly block or dodge in most circumstances. Brawl has the least hit stun out of the entire series, but even while combos are difficult to do, at least you hitting most often means that you are not being hit. In Subspace Emissary, hitting an enemy and then immediately being punished is the most common interaction in the game. In fact, it's even worse than just that. There's a further depth in Smash games to attack strength. If two characters attack each other at the same time, they will either clash, meaning both hits are negated and they're both stunned for a moment, one will overpower the other, a much stronger move overriding a much weaker one, or both characters hit each other at the same time. In Subspace Emissary, there is no clashing. You, for nearly every enemy, cannot overpower their attack, and they will overpower yours, even for creatures that seem like they should be notably weaker than you. And lastly, if both you and the enemy hit each other at the same time, the level of punishment is wildly different between the two. Rather than trading blows with an equal opponent, you are killing a deeply disposable creature that is likely 1 out of the 5 to 10 on screen at the moment, and they're dealing a significant blow to you that could at best delay you and at worst send you right into another hit or push you into a vulnerable position. The only enemy type that feels decent to fight against is the Primids, the characters most resembling the actual fighters in Smash. They can be clashed with, they can be hit stunned, and they are balanced enough to serve their role. Horde enemies by design should be weak alone but strong together. Some of these enemies can utterly fucking solo you. It is crazy. And the level works in tandem with the enemies to make it so you have to deal with them. Who designed this area exactly? Do they have an address? Can I have it? This is not the only area like this, ones where the game will just ping pong you for its own entertainment, all while you're fighting against enemies you cannot do the same to. Throughout my recent playthrough, I kept telling the people that I was hanging out with, oh, this is the most annoying enemy in the game, until I found a new one on the very next level that was somehow even more annoying than the last one. I ended up saying it so many times that it became an inside joke, but every time it happened, I was not kidding that this one was even more annoying than the last. And all of this is made worse for one very simple reason. People do not play Subspace Emissary for the gameplay, they play it for the cutscenes. This was a relatively common shift in priorities in the mid-2000s to early 2010s. Making your game more cinematic comes with inherent costs from both a design and financial perspective. Financially, more resources were being diverted to graphics and cutscenes as games were being turned more narrative, which did take somewhat away from the resources that would be directed to gameplay. However, just as many issues came with trying to stylistically mend the gameplay and the cutscenes. The gap between what could be pre-rendered or otherwise animated and what could be done in real time with player freedom for games was maybe at its widest point, at least visually, around that era. And so, to meet some modicum of the feeling from the story, to make games more cohesive, player freedom would start to be limited. I think one of the most unique and often terrible examples of this is QuickTime events. Being originally popularized by Shenmue 1 far before this era of gaming, it reached its popularity in the mid to late 2000s. Sometimes it would effectively increase tension in a cutscene, but most times it was something closer to this. The most common criticism of QuickTime events was that they served the same punishment as gameplay without the benefits of skill expression. The punishment wasn't that you needed to restart a challenge from scratch again necessarily, meaningful potential progress was not lost, it was just that you had to rewatch the cutscene. The only thing you lost was time. For most video games, there was some inherent reward for the gameplay. You did something mechanically difficult and now feel competent. You completed a puzzle and now feel intelligent. You built something and now feel satisfaction in your creation. In Subspace Emissary, you feel rewarded because you get to the next cutscene, the next part of the movie. The strongest emotion you feel from completing a level is relief. Every level is just one incredibly extended QuickTime event, a long time event, and every time you mess up, you need to play for longer before you see the next scene. Subspace Emissary was not the first Smash game to have gameplay like this. In the before times, locked within the depths of Melee's extras is a mostly forgotten mode called Adventure Mode. Paradoxically, this mode, despite having the same side-scroller mechanics and being made earlier, is actually better made from a gameplay perspective. Enemies do very little knockback and are generally very weak, serving more as moving obstacles in the level than active menaces to happiness. Rather than every enemy having annoyingly high health bars, they either were knocked out in a single decently strong hit or had stages like paratroopers, losing their wings before being vulnerable to being knocked out. Stronger enemies did exist, but they were slower and ultimately avoidable. Similar to Subspace, it had moments where the progress would freeze and a group battle would take place, but rather than it just being more poorly designed enemies, you fought modified versions of actual characters, utilizing the game's intended mechanics and design between the moments of novel platforming. Each level brings you through the universe of a different character, with some having a lot more effort put in than others. For around half the levels, you just do a specialized battle on one of the stages, but for something like F-Zero, you have a racetrack awash in a bright blue sky and even bluer ocean, dodging cars like you do on the regular map, but in cycles tuned to the pace of the platforming. There are even some cutscenes. In the Star Fox level, you mostly just play on Corneria, the stage, but after you beat Fox the first time, an interim animation of Fox's crew plays and the next battle is fighting either Fox or Falco with the support of the ships firing at you during the length of the fight. There's secret cutscenes if you meet specific requirements in the Mario and Kirby levels. There's even a secret final boss. If you beat the game on normal or higher difficulty in less than 18 minutes, the final section that would normally just be a fight against Bowser on Final Destination has something extra to it. The regular ending has you defeat Bowser, have him turn into a trophy, and then the game just ends. However, if you do clear the game fast enough, spooky. The secret ending is a final boss fight against Giga Bowser, and is the first time Giga Bowser ever showed up in a Nintendo game. Once you defeat him, just a much heavier and stronger version of Bowser, the game ends and the trophy of the character you played with is added to the board. I have never heard anyone speak about this mode in my entire life. That seems odd, right? This is for all intents and purposes a spiritual predecessor to Subspace Emissary. Sakurai lists it as the direct gameplay inspiration, but it is not brought up nearly as much, despite Melee still being discussed more than Brawl to this day. To me, however, the reason is pretty clear. It lacks identity. While Adventure Mode did a much better job in the aspect of gameplay, the simple unavoidable fact is that this is not what Smash Bros. Was designed around. This is an official mod. Subspace Emissary is an official mod. They are both taking the original design of the engine and using it for another purpose, and there is no escaping that feeling. It pervades through every moment just how inferior to regular gameplay it is, and so, while Adventure Mode is a better game than Subspace Emissary, it gets just about as much cultural relevance as it deserves, which is essentially zero. World of Light, the story mode to Smash Ultimate, suffers this very same problem. In my opinion, it is far and away the most fun story mode in the entire series. It takes the game board aesthetic of Subspace Emissary and turns it into an actual game board, progressing by taking on individual fights themed with spirits, the souls of niche characters from every franchise in Smash and many Nintendo franchises that don't even have a character as a fighter. The announcement of a new story mode and that initial opening cutscene made one of the biggest splashes of the entire year leading up to the release of Smash Ultimate. The trailer on YouTube got 17 million views. A trailer, mind you, for an optional story mode in a video game whose appeal is contextless short battles on floating platforms. If World of Light had cutscenes, as many as Subspace Emissary did, it would almost certainly be considered on par, if not better than the original. But it didn't. While certainly more popular than Adventure Mode and in my opinion better, its legacy primarily persists through Alpharad's long play of the series and Lightlock Challenge and not much else. Which, by the way, I beat without DLC characters, Alpharad. Your spirit is weak, I could kill you with a glare alone. Simply put, people freaked out about World of Light before release because and only because it resembled Subspace Emissary. So what is so special about this story mode? Honestly, I've been disparaging the gameplay for at least, 12 minutes now? What about it left such an impression on everyone who played it? Well, it's complicated. If you were to just see how this story works scene to scene without knowing any Nintendo characters, you would be baffled. Every cutscene is entirely wordless, not a single line of dialogue is exchanged between characters. Meaning is still translated character to character because the meanings translated are quite simple in nature, but it's an utter void of context for anyone not already filled in. The setting, this collection of biomes and structures, is not given explanation or justification. It is something specific, we'll get to that, but it's something that only works as symbolism from a logical standpoint. The world exists because all the characters had to be in the same place. Similarly, all the characters are given an assumed understanding. We're given the grace of their names as they appear, but all information about them is either meant to already be known or be expressed through body language, sounds, and actions. The plot of Subspace Emissary on a ground level is an exercise in clumping. The overall crisis, the world coming to an end, is expressed through a bunch of small crises, most often subspace bombs counting down and then eventually going off, and some set of protagonists are forced to work together to deal with whatever threat is in their way. We're shown vignettes of various locations, introducing new characters for the first few hours of the campaign, and slowly see each group connect and grow in size as they fight bigger and bigger threats and consolidate on the most important points of interest in the game world. It is beyond bare bones. There's a feeling that the story does genuinely happen by random circumstance. Just like the levels being wholly untailored to whatever characters are meant to be traversing it, it feels from a story perspective that any of these characters could have fallen into the proximity of entirely different ones if the story happened an hour or a day later in this weird little metatextual fight world. Fox's ship is taken down by commandeered Meta Knights, forcing him to crash land somewhere in the jungle where Diddy Kong was just left alone after Donkey Kong was turned into a statue, and where Fox crash lands so happens to awaken Rayquaza, who lives in the lake nearby. Link is literally just walking through a forest when he passes by a sleeping Yoshi at the same time that the spores from Meta Knight's ship pass over them. Zero Suit Samus infiltrates the same facility that Pikachu so happens to be in to retrieve her suit and frees Pikachu in an act of kindness and mercy. Falco, Fox, and Diddy Kong spot Donkey Kong on a transport platform flying to the floating facility where Zero Suit Samus and Pikachu are, and while boarding the ship, Captain Falcon and Olimar spot them. A pair that met up literally without explanation other than Olimar was about to be killed and Captain Falcon was just there. Faced with a worldwide crisis, each explosion and battle pushes these characters into each other, and each one seems to naturally get protagonist vibes from the other. There is confusion sometimes, but it's almost always immediately resolved. Lucario's aura exists in this universe, so there is a canonized goodness and badness, and it feels like everyone can innately sense it to some degree. The villains, too, are the traditional villains of Nintendo games. The hierarchy seems to be Wario and King Dedede on the bottom or fringes of the operation, Bowser as the right-hand man, and Ganondorf as the leader, but as the story goes on, we see more and more into the villain behind the villain behind the villain. Ganondorf, we find out like a third of the way through the story, is answering to the being known as Master Hand, a being present throughout the entire series. It, for currently unclear reasons, is commanding the destruction of this world, and the traditional antagonists are carrying the plan out for it. They are the agents enacting subspace on the world. They are the Subspace Emissaries. With the help of Fox, Peach, Sheik, and others, Meta Knight is able to take back control of his ship, at the same time that the group heading to the Subspace Bomb Factory, the facility, all crash into the main chamber. At the command of Ganondorf, all of the Robs under his control start to prime every last subspace bomb at once, being forced to betray the leader of the Robs, the Rob, in the process. Unable to stop them, the group escapes via Captain Falcon's ship, and the entire facility is consumed in the largest subspace bubble by far. Now, finally, with everyone combined in one target remaining, the goal is simple. Strike into the heart of subspace through the void of the former bomb factory. In a cutscene that can only logically exist for the sake of being fucking badass, Ganondorf and Bowser come out on the helm of a subspace gun, one the size of a fortress. It gets to fire all of one time before Meta Knight's ship comes careening over the horizon. What happens next is one of the single coolest sequences I've seen in a video game. With the ship far too big to evade projectiles, it gets as close as it can before being cleanly shot through, only for every ship of the mainline characters to shoot out from the fire, splitting in different directions. While the main theme of Super Smash Bros. Brawl plays, we see every protagonist weaving perfectly between a barrage of shots that could wipe out a fucking mountain each, and while they each draw the fortress's fire as a distraction, Kirby comes in on the Dragoon, cold-blooded stare on its face as it rips through the entire gun, demolishing it in a single strike as everyone flies directly into the bubble. I feel euphoric anytime I watch that moment. It's just perfect in so many ways. So much of this story mode is essentially fan service, and while that's often the best part of it, this moment soars well above all of the other ones. However, just as the story peaks in cool factor, and as all of our protagonists make it to the heart of the enemy, things take a turn for the worse. Up until now, Ganondorf has only engaged with Master Hand through a screen, and so, once he's finally able to meet it in person, just as every single protagonist is closing in on the center of Subspace, he is able to see that Master Hand isn't controlling itself. In an act of surprising devotion for a prophesized apocalyptic god made of pure darkness, Ganondorf leaps straight at Taboo to try to save Master Hand, only to get blasted backwards, his flying corpse slamming into the back of Master Hand and detaching it from Taboo's control, no longer necessary to bring about the end of the world. Oh, and by the way, I tricked you. Master Hand is the Subspace Emissary. The other antagonists are the Subspace Emissary's emissaries. Just as everyone arrives to fight the source of all this destruction, Taboo quickly kills off every single character at once with a single blast. We see every single fighter, every hero we followed so far turned into trophies, leaving an utter chasm in its wake. Nothing but silence and taboo is left in Subspace, ensuring the eventual destruction of everything. Obviously, that's not the end. Taboo surrounds himself in a shield of locations, the ones consumed by the subspace bombs, just as some earlier foreshadowing finally gets shadowed. King Dedede, much like his role in actual Kirby games, turned out to not be strictly villainous. Throughout the story, he was capturing protagonists and attaching badges to them, once everyone is trophied, activate, restoring Ness, Luigi, and Kirby back to life. And so, with the only survivors faced with a god to kill, the best part of the entire campaign begins. Being the only survivors and with everyone's trophies scattered throughout Subspace, Luigi, Ness, King Dedede, and Kirby all sprint throughout it looking for as many friends as they can find. Before, the only possible benefit that killing an enemy would get you is a trophy base, one that would let you turn another enemy into a trophy you can collect for the game-wide trophy collection system. Otherwise, there was no actual reason for you to kill most enemies unless absolutely required, turning the entire game into an exercise of inconvenience. In these two levels, running throughout Subspace, you're collecting your friends in the form of items. Suddenly, enemies and platforming serve as obstacles blocking something tangible. The two back-to-back levels are filled with essentially mini-challenges, with each one being rewarded and a friend saved, all for a specific and gigantic reason. Every single person you save in these two levels becomes a playable character, one for the largest level in the entire game. At this point, both the heroes and villains share the same goal, and after being revived, looking up towards the wall of reality bubbles, they have only one place left to go. The Great Maze is the final level in Subspace Emissary. It lasts 2 hours. With the world fragmented and enclosed around Taboo, the entire campaign is combined in fragments, interconnected by doors in one gigantic map. You're able to choose 3 characters out of the list of everyone you saved in the last 2 levels, traversing through different worlds to find subspace doors. This level, The Great Maze, recontextualizes all of the gameplay of Subspace Emissary in unique and interesting ways. First and foremost, there is an actual punishment for losing. It's not like big, but it's there. This level has save points, some that can warp to others, some that are on its own, but if you die while exploring the game world, you will actually be punished by being sent back to your save point. While the enemies are still irritating, there isn't necessarily always just one direction you need to be going, so enemies are more evenly spread in ways that let you avoid or deal with them without just suffering. Thanks to the subspace levels too, you're able to actually choose characters you know and like instead of being stuck with whatever the game chooses for you. That generally untailored feeling to the levels, that idea that they could have been made for and work with anyone, seems to actually be purposeful, as most of the areas in the Great Maze have sections directly copied from the campaign itself with slight alterations. The things you're actually looking for in this map, as said before, are subspace doors, these shadowy looking ones that lead you into a fight against subspace versions of every character and boss fight in the game. And I cannot tell you how much of an oasis these fights are. The first 3/4 of this campaign deprive you of so much happiness during the gameplay that anytime a simple one-on-one fight would happen, it would be the highlight of the hour, side to side with the boss fights themselves. I feel like I was abused the way I'm talking about this, but it's actually insane how thankful I was anytime I found one of these doors, because a simple, fun fight is what you would get, placed in the gnarly setting of chaotic subspace. While the story is a little artistically confused and non-committal in its setting, Subspace is distinct and hard to forget. The spiraling pillars in the background of these fights give such an immense scale to where you are that it doesn't even feel like it should be possible. Each is its own tornado, some vortex swallowing up the world, and a space way bigger on the inside than it ever looked on the out. The fights themselves also have unique platform layouts every time, having many that were simply never used in any actual levels before or after the campaign, some that are genuinely super fun as well. It made me want a Subspace level in the regular level set, one that cycles through all these layouts or picks one at random. The Great Maze projects this confidence that it felt like the gameplay of Subspace Emissary lacked before now, a concept to this madness and a commitment to cohesion. Unlike Adventure Mode from Melee, while you are traveling through a bunch of different game worlds both before and during the Great Maze, the gritty, dull, hyper-detailed late 2000s filter overrides any individual identity present. It's such a distinct tone setter from both Nintendo and other Smash games that it's immediately recognizable as Brawl, and it serves to give it an identity, one most present during this level. It's an exercise of ambition that's fractured in its direction, something cohesive despite the hard lines placed between everything, small, simple levels, but also something more. One of my favorite moments in any game of all time happens in the Great Maze. There doesn't seem to be a strong internal logic to where you travel to and why. It's seemingly weakly based on the actual world map, but you can enter any door and travel to any other level at really any moment. The jungle level, originally an introduction to Donkey and Diddy Kong, is placed squarely in the middle of the map. It's a section of the original level with some changes, and it's mostly pretty forgettable, almost comfortable compared to some of the other ones. You reach a split on the left side between two different doors, with the game literally pointing you towards one and not the other. If you decide to enter the top door, the one not pointed to, you'll fight against Dark Donkey Kong. Nearly every other time you defeat a dark enemy, you're teleported to the next area. However, when you finally beat him, this is the coolest thing in any Smash game. It's one of those things I genuinely struggle to capture into words. The lazy, almost drunk rendition of the main theme, every character and boss in a stasis, the giant imposing door in the background. The game is 2.5D, but in no other point is a door given this much depth to it. The purpose of this area is to show how many more characters and boss fights you have left, but it embodies an identity all of its own. The contrast in space is striking. In the fight just before this, you were given a size to the area that feels massive. This, in comparison, feels almost intimate. In a game so cinematic, so flashy, a place like this feels outright wrong in a way that catches me deeply off guard. There's nothing bombastic, no action happening, no grandiose moment or enemy to fight. I don't want to be here, but I do. The only time the Great Maze kind of falters is when hunting down the last few doors. Most often there'll be stragglers you missed all across the map, and it becomes a chore to slowly move through every area just to open a single door, then take the journey through already explored areas to the next door over and over again for like the last 5 remaining. That being said, it's a small speed bump made inevitable by the structure of the level itself. Once each and every boss and fighter is cleared from the map, the door is finally fully open, allowing you to crack the shell surrounding Taboo. Taboo prepares to do the exact same attack again because he's a fucking hack, until Sonic appears out of absolutely nowhere to shatter his wings. That's fine. And with Taboo finally weakened, you can choose 5 characters out of the ones you saved for one final battle. The final boss fight, with how much Taboo has been hyped up as this nigh unkillable god, is as expected. It's not underwhelming, but it doesn't necessarily do anything new. The boss fights are likely the most consistent highlights of Subspace Emissary, their mechanics mixing together traditional and story mode gameplay quite well, with the best ones intermixing platforming and atmosphere together with it. Meta Ridley is the standout, being a high-action, dynamic, scary fight, with the ship you're fighting on top of being slammed and shifted and dragged down slowly. It's maybe the best single cinematic gameplay set piece in the entirety of the campaign. Taboo, in comparison, is fine. The stage doesn't react to the strikes or anything, but it's properly big and feeling and has a lot of neat attacks and moments. The fight holds that same alien feeling that Master and Crazy Hand always seemed to. Like, the only way Nintendo could make a unique aesthetic in a fighting game of 35 different characters is to make one that feels utterly devoid of humanity while mimicking its form. The background cycles between space and kaleidoscopes, the music is kick-ass and equally weird, it makes use of 2.5D for some cool effects, and it is truly satisfying at the end of the world and the end of this entire adventure to finally land that killing blow. And with Taboo defeated, Subspace Emissary comes to an end. There is no afterstory, the climax is the falling action, is the resolution. There's no more plot to wrap up because this was the only plot. The conflict was resolved and the world returns to normal. We see the subspace bubbles each dissipate into nothingness and, after one final glance at the world, get an ending screen, one showing a trophy base on a bed of flora. So that was fucking nonsense. It's clear that the story was an allegory, like of course it was, but most stories function both with its own in-universe logic and a symbolic one, but this story seemed to be near entirely functional. What happened in the story was exactly whatever needed to happen to serve the meaning, so what is the meaning exactly? Well, the key to it lies in the wider context of the game and the series as a whole. On booting up the first game in the series, Super Smash Bros. For the N64, we're greeted to an opening cutscene. A white-gloved hand plucks Mario and Pikachu out of a chest before setting up obstacles on a desk, and with the snap of a finger, it all comes to life. It cycles through each character, showing exciting scenes until the original announcer comes in with the very first Master Hand, in the context of this series, is the creator of these battles, a stand-in for the child who owns these figures. We can imagine the entire series and gameplay as play fighting. The action figures are dolls being given imaginative life, and us being able to peek into that imagination, one full of big clashes and cool moments with all their favorite Nintendo characters. As a narrative to bring together so many Nintendo games, it absolutely works, and even further, it works for bringing any sort of character into this world that Nintendo can get their hands on. Jumping to Brawl's development, Masahiro Sakurai was under the impression and operated under the belief that this would be the final Smash game. It was a product of ambition, but not just because of the era. For all intents and purposes, they would go as big as they can. There were no more after this. We can imagine Subspace Emissary not as a story in the middle of the franchise, but as an ending, and the question looming over this apocalypse story is simple. What happens to our imaginative worlds when we try to grow up? This contrived world of smashed together biomes has an actual logical explanation. It is the imaginative world of this child that's on the verge of adulthood. MatPat, of all people, was one of the earlier ones to get this right and point this out, something he did like 3 times in his entire career, and he did it in just
"Come at me, internet, my Pichu will smash ball you up"
very him fashion. There's signs in Smash 64 and Melee and Brawl of growing up, of aging, placed subtly in the fringes of the games. In the original, we got the shot of the room with plush dolls from a toy chest, signaling somewhat of a young kid. In the trophy collection area of Melee, we get a look at a more detailed and mature-looking room, with a TV, a collection of game consoles, and more. Crazy Hand is introduced in Melee as well, a foil to Master Hand, this destructive and chaotic being to contrast the gentle elegance of Master Hand. One is the desire to create, a guiding hand towards imagination, and the other is the desire to destroy. Brawl, likely just by coincidence, has its art style at the series' most mature looking as well, aging an art direction in tandem with the child. It's almost tackily put on, to the degree of feeling somewhat like a gimmick, this endless insistence that it has changed, has gotten better and more complex. It's a gritty version of fighting, one that can't spare saturation to its greens and blues. Taboo's name is rather on the nose. The destruction of this imaginative world is not the wish of Master Hand, that unbound innocent creativity, that desire to smash these plush dolls and action figures together. No, it's being controlled by the outside world, by social taboo. In the mind of this former child, this person on the precipice of adulthood, to grow up is to abandon such a place. This isn't an apocalypse of a world, this is an apocalypse of a soul, and it's one that nearly succeeds. These characters don't need narrative introduction because the kid knows who they are. They're not even technically canonically Fox or Mario or Pit, they're manifestations of them in the mind of this person. They're protagonists and know the others are because the child knows they are. The villains are villains because the child knows they are. These locations, the arena that these battles would take place in, castles, zoos, ruins, these templates of imagination, these fragments of their mind are consumed, frozen into place and stored in a void of social pressures and anxieties, the creative entirely puppeted by expectation. It's not often pointed out that the villains were following the orders of Master Hand and not Crazy Hand. They were not disloyal to this creativity, they simply understood their part. They only followed it because it was just another scenario to them, some new outlet of creativity, an adventure to be the bad guys in. Once Ganondorf, in actual Zelda lore a monster who only cares for himself, saw what was happening, he sacrificed himself to try and free Master Hand from its chains. No fighter here is truly evil, no part is corrupted or bad. The only imposing force is the one that controls the hand that creates. But it loses. It fails to consume this world, and due to your efforts and the efforts of these creations, this innocence is protected. The apocalypse is narrowly avoided. Despite intending to be the end of the series, Sakurai was repeatedly pressured and eventually all but forced to continue it. In a sense, due to Sakurai being all but forced to make more entries, he was forced to cope with almost the very same thing in the story, but in the other direction. Smash 4, while not nearly as canonized, has a moment of intense chaotic fire at the end of Classic mode. Master Hand is killed early, only for Crazy Hand, the desire for destruction of Sakurai's creation rips itself apart into a shadowy monster. It forms into creatures of all kinds, eventually an entire fortress you need to run through, lashing out at anything and everything, this hatred to be either forced to create more or have your legacy, your art, your soul grabbed and molded by someone else, until you finally strike it at its heart. Revealing a frail ball, the core of the series gently waiting for its own destruction. And yet, the series would continue on. Smash Ultimate has a more optimistic ending. World of Light is something that, unlike Subspace Emissary, was entirely a product of Sakurai's own mind. Subspace Emissary was partially formulated by Kazushige Nojima, a writer for the Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts franchises, and the story was a mix of their inspirations. In an interview Sakurai did with Satoru Iwata, the CEO of Nintendo at the time and the person that would later force him to continue the series, he spoke of his original idea for a story mode. I had envisioned a more serious tone for the story. Something with some misfortune, like a single character escaping total annihilation of his squadron and then fighting back while rounding up his allies. Ultimately, we worked together and successfully organized our ideas into the storyline for the Subspace Emissary. This, as you may be able to tell, is the exact premise of World of Light, a story where only Kirby survives and needs to save everyone else in order to defeat the being that wiped them out, Galeem and its counterpart, Darkon. The ending of the near 20-hour-long campaign is a matter of balance. You can choose to fight just Galeem or just Darkon, but killing only one will lead to either darkness or light consuming the universe entirely, neither being a good ending. The true ending of all things is a matter of release. Instead of continuing this series, endlessly pushed on by a desire for profit from Nintendo, the creative work was finished a very long time ago. Subspace Emissary is not an ending, it is the ending still to this day. The stories that came after were cries of pain. Any creation should only continue so long as it is genuine. To be forced to leave and forced to stay are two evils of the same kind, and the only true search is one for genuine life in the mind. The spirits of these imaginations in the true ending of World of Light are let go, and they decide, altogether, to fly up, away from this world, in a column of glowing light. While it makes logical sense that the child is a Nintendo fan, it's still an important sign that it was made this way at all. The ending to the Smash series, at least the one intended at the time, is a commitment to childhood innocence. faced with a world that seeks to control and sedate the mind, to force cohesion through shame and stress and social conventions, to drop the dolls and action figures and pens and pencils and controllers, to leave these imaginary worlds behind, Masahiro Sakurai and this child, maybe even one in the same, refuse to back down. To kill that pure imagination is to kill a part of the self. It's an apocalypse. A void can consume you, lock this part of you away, control your desire to create, but no matter what happens, your creations will never leave you, not until they're ready to do so. The legacy of this story mode in the minds of most who played it is not one of understanding the plot. The story has not been analyzed as much as it could have been, and most have only played it as a kid and remember it from then. The worst sins of it were honestly just slight annoyances and boredom, things that easily wash away with the sands of time, and the most notable parts are the vague impressions that still live on. Single moments exist as vignettes in the mind. The sunset gleaming on the water, the cold, imposing void of subspace, seeing your favorite characters interacting with each other in ways you'd never thought you'd see. Despite the bleak setting, what we get is a view into the purest form of imagination. We see not only the child's imagination realized, but our own. The deepest desire that so many of us have, to make these scenes in our head, the smashing together of action figures, be painted into real moments. No other place could such a story happen. No combination of joy and light could be combined by any other developer on the planet. Such a strange mix of so many different worlds, ones that mean so much to so many, could only happen here and now at this point in time, in this story, in this imaginative world. It's a story constructed out of limits and necessities, fit to a mold of its requirements, and yet still made exhaustively unique, for better and for worse. It's what would happen if you gave a child the chance to make a story for their favorite game. Unrefined ideas, overwhelming passion, and unrelenting innocence. That is Subspace Emissary. Okay, so I just moved, which means I need as much money as I can get. Which is not, I'm not trying to pressure you to subscribe to that Patreon, but like if there was a time and you were considering it, this would be it. With this new freedom, so to speak, I think I'm going to be able to produce a lot more content. I feel so much better already just being on my own. If you do decide to subscribe to the Patreon, it only pays out when I actually release a video. You can set monthly limits in the payment section, so if I release like 5 videos in a month, which will never happen, you won't get charged for all of them if you set the limit to 2. Becoming a patron is mostly something you do just to support me, but you do get a role in my Discord server, a direct message line to me, as well as your name at the end of videos, and if you pay enough, you also get your name shouted out, so I'm gonna do that now. So Patreon shoutouts to Jared Chode, Wallace de Morinville, Zimborg, Brody Larson, Dankley Voidley, Dawn and Indigo, Edmund Dong, Grinkle Stinkle, MF Bitchboy, The Not Cursed Judge, Wayne Wheeler, Ace Vanguard, Beagle, Bestest Patron, Connor, DeFrance, Fake Milk, Florian, Gerberil, Gerberil, like a gerbil, Hayes Wheelock, how do I pronounce this? Imperator Odenathus, Odenathus, Imperator Odenathus, Jacob Falk, Jocelyn, Judge, did you enjoy making this vid? Vaguely. Maiden Batter, Peter Healy, Ribbonaster, Ro Ramden, Robin Michael Becker, Ruby Sherbring, Sambro99, Shunks, Solify Hart, Ted H, Thomas Scott, Tim the Cringe, Undersea Rexy VT, and Zongheng Zhao. Thank you everyone who subscribed to my Patreon, and with that all being said, I hope you have a nice day.